Welcome to Out of the Break, a behind-the-scenes look at the most pressing issues in the world of college football as it relates to North Central Florida. Out of the Break is brought to you by Chris Doering Mortgage. Now here's the host of the Sports Fix, Adam Reardon and Chris Doering.
Welcome to week number 2 of Out of the Break. Adam Reardon, Chris Doering. We're the hosts of the Sports Fix. You can catch us weekdays from 10 to noon on AM 850 in Gainesville, AM 900, and then online at ESPNGo1.com. Today we're going to take a look back at the weekend that was, Florida's victory over Bowling Green, and then preview the upcoming SEC opener as the Gators travel to College Station to take on Texas A&M. So let's start with the game. We're going to break down the quarterback situation and the decision from Will Muschamp on Monday for the starter in the second half of the show. But I wasn't a big fan of the opening play. Kind of a gimmicky way to start both quarterbacks, almost adding insult to injury to the fact that neither guy had really been chosen as the starting quarterback up to that point.
I'm sure that when you ask any coach in college football, they'd always like to have one more play. You know, whether it's you won a football game, you want to get better by one play every single game. You essentially wasted a play there to start the football game against Bowling Green, and I didn't like it because you're the head coach or you're the offensive coordinator. Whoever's decision it is to make, this is going to be my starting quarterback, and I thought we had already had some sort of plan put in place that Driscoll, then Brissett, and then we were going to reevaluate. You're rolling both out on the field. To me, it was a waste of a play. Now, did it cost Florida game? Absolutely not. But I think as somebody who watches football, you look at that and go, why? Why even bother doing that? To me, it was just an absolute waste and didn't really accomplish anything, that's for sure.
They stuck Brissett in there as the starting quarterback. Driscoll was the starting wide receiver. I'll be honest, during the game, I didn't even know that Driscoll was out there at the wide receiver spot sitting in the stadium. So from that point on, Driscoll got the remainder of the snaps in the first quarter, was able to throw the ball a lot more than what we saw with Jacoby Brissett in the second quarter. I almost feel bad for the fact that Jacoby Brissett was so limited in what he was asked to do. Obviously, they had some success running the football when he was at the quarterback spot, but really didn't get a good look at what Jacoby Brissett was able to do. In fact, the numbers were kind of similar percentage-wise. The yardage difference, 110 yards for Jeff Driscoll, and the majority of that came on a 50-yard touchdown pass to Frankie Hammond Jr. with about 40 yards after the catch.
If the true plan was to evaluate their play during the football game to decide who's going to be the quarterback moving forward, it was really impossible to really gauge how good Brissett could be because of what you mentioned. They were running the ball extremely well. You weren't asking him to throw it a whole lot. So it's hard for you to look at Brissett and realize he should or should not be a starter for this football team moving forward. These are things that should have been done during the preseason, during spring football, then into fall practice. That's when you decide who your starting quarterback is, not midway through the second quarter in your season opener.
I'll be honest with you, I am not sold that this is going to be the last of Jacoby Brissett here at the University of Florida. We'll talk more about the decision in the second half, as I mentioned before. But the opening play, about the most creativity we saw the entire day, a vanilla game plan. Obviously, a lot of teams do that in their openers, trying to save a little bit of what they have in their repertoire for their conference games. I expect to see more in terms of some maybe more downfield throws, maybe some more trick plays, maybe some more motions and shifts and all that stuff. But I did think that, obviously to me, the running game was the most impressive part. Gillislee looked very good. Some concern about the third and short situations. Florida wasn't able to convert on a number of those opportunities. And to me, that comes down to just a bust by one guy here or there. Football is the ultimate team game. If you don't have every player completing their assignment successfully, you have a chance to have a failed play. And that's what happened in a lot of those situations. Guys whiffed here or there, guys missed their assignment, and ultimately that showed up in their inability to convert.
One quick thing about playing vanilla. First game of the season, at home, you're the University of Florida. I don't care who you're playing against. More times than not, vanilla is worth 40 to 50 points in a football game, not 24 like we saw inside the swamp.
I knew that the offense was going to struggle. I kind of felt that this was going to be a game where you'd kind of knock some of the rust off and see how your offense was developing personality-wise. The thing that disappointed me was the defense. I thought the defense was going to be much more dominant. I thought the defense was going to be able to get the team 3 and out off the field. But a long drive, 89-yard drive for Bowling Green there at one point in time. They were able to put 14 points on the board. And to me, it just looked like Florida wasn't maybe they were vanilla on defense more than what we'll see this week against Texas A&M, but really was maybe not as dominant as I expected that defensive line to be.
Think about how much more of a sweat it would have been had their kicker been able to knock down some, pretty average length field goals there. I mean, at one point late in the third quarter, we could have been looking at a Bowling Green 20, Florida 17 score line, which would have really put everybody on tilt inside the swamp on Saturday.
Florida got the win in the game against Bowling Green. They won the turnover margin, which is a point of emphasis for Coach Muschamp. They got to get better on the penalties. We talked about that on our radio show, that this is an undisciplined team historically. They've got to clean that up as they head to Texas A&M. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we'll preview that trip to College Station on the other side of the break. Thanks for tuning in and watching us here on Out of the Break. It was here in this end zone where I caught my SEC record-breaking touchdown. But all of those touchdowns would not have been possible if it weren't for great teammates working together for one goal. The same is true when it comes to purchasing a home. At Chris Doering Mortgage, our experienced and knowledgeable team can handle all types of loans. And like football, timing is everything. With rates at historic lows and prices from a decade ago, now is the time to buy. Call us today to put my all-star team to work for you. Chris Doering Mortgage, a name you know, a name you can trust. Welcome back to Out of the Break. Florida wins their opener against Bowling Green. Now they take on Texas A&M, an unfamiliar opponent, as A&M joins the SEC here for their first year. The quarterback decision was made, Adam, on Monday. Will Muschamp announcing that it would be Jeff Driscoll that would be the starter in this game at Texas A&M. Did mention that Jacoby Brissett is one snap away, as most backups are in normal situations. But as I said before, I'm not so sure this is the last we'll see of Jacoby Brissett. But I did talk to people last week who said Jeff Driscoll was the guy that they felt like was going to be the starter after watching all the preseason practices and into the first week of the practice because of his athletic ability. And that's what Will Muschamp mentioned, the ability to run more nakeds, the bootlegs, what he can do in terms of scrambling and keeping plays alive, gives this offense an opportunity to be more successful. And that's kind of what we talked about with Tim Tebow with the New York Jets. When you're deficient at certain positions, like you are at the receiver spot and like you are at the offensive line spot, you kind of need some of that improvisation, and that's what Jeff Driscoll evidently brings.
Apparently Driscoll brings the athleticism to the table, and normally that can't hurt you in a lot of cases. I want to go back to what you were saying about Brissett not being done here at Florida. To me, the hardest thing that has to be done for a kid coming out of high school who's been basically an all-state kid, everybody tells him how great he is to show up at school and realize you're the backup. Now, the thing that has to be even more tough than that is to be a starter at one point at the University of Florida and then realize now you've lost your job and now you have to back up that guy. I'm not so sure that we haven't seen the last of Jacoby Brissett. If we don't see him at some points during the next couple of games or so, remember he still would have his redshirt capability to transfer somewhere else. I don't think you're Jacoby Brissett. You give up the starting position at the University of Florida and then just sit and wait your turn behind a guy who's in the same class.
Jacoby Brissett is not the same guy as what we've seen from a number of other high school prima donnas coming out into the college ranks. He's a guy that chose to come to University of Florida after Jeff Driscoll had already committed. He was the #1 quarterback recruit in the country. Is not afraid of competition. He came back this year wanting to compete, and I think this is a different breed. I think he's a different type athlete than maybe what we see in this day and age. So I expect him to stay around and compete at least through the season, and let's see how the chips fall. In terms of being deficient at some of the playmaker spots, I think it was very telling this week when Will Muschamp said that Luchez Purifoy would play on offense as well as defense. To me, that means that not a lot of guys over there at the wide receiver spot that you're very happy with.
No, I think that you mentioned the Jets. We'll draw another analogy. Yeah. It's like moving Antonio Cromartie to your wide receiver core because you have no other receivers. I think the leading receiver on this team had 3 catches. You had a couple of guys from the wide receiver spot. Florida is blessed with probably 2 or 3 number 2 or 3. Yeah. They do not have a #1.
Andre DeBose is the guy that should be the #1 guy, but is not disciplined enough, doesn't really show that he knows the offense well enough, is not able to play as consistently as you would like your #1 to be, and so subsequently they're left kind of searching for some other guys. Well, one thing that you're having to search for if you're Will Muschamp and this coaching staff is tape on Texas A&M because their game last week against Louisiana Tech was canceled. I have an opinion about this. I want to ask you first, is this an advantage for Florida or an advantage for Texas A&M that they didn't play?
I think as a whole it's an advantage for Florida because if Texas A&M in their first game needs to beat off the rust like Florida obviously had to do in theirs, then that could be a major issue. You get a chance to work your way through some kinks, realize some deficiencies in your team that you may not have thought were there because you were only practicing against yourself through the fall and through the spring. I think that this is an advantage for Florida going to Texas A&M and having that game under the belt where Texas A&M does not.
I would agree with you to some degree, but let's look at it from the other side of the coin. Florida obviously has been repping Texas A&M for the most of the summer. They've looked at the tape from Houston. They obviously know the tendencies. This is an offense that's run by Dana Holgorsen, Mike Leach. I mean, so you know what you're going to see. But the problem is here is that if you're Florida, you don't know how the personnel is going to be used. You don't know which guys are going to be where, what tendencies they show with certain formations and motions and stuff like that. So to some degree, it's almost as if you're going to go out there and be a bit unprepared without having some adequate tape on these guys. I think obviously Will Muschamp knows Texas A&M's personnel fairly well from having been there before with Texas. But I look at it as perhaps a little bit of a disadvantage for this Gator team.
Well, I think, and if you're the Florida coaching staff, you can go back to Houston, look at tape from when Coach Sumlin was there. If you watch the tape with Case Keenum, it may keep you up at night. You obviously watch tape of Houston without Case Keenum, you sleep like a baby because that's a totally different team. Now, can they find somebody at Texas A&M to run that offense that they've run at Houston like a Case Keenum? If they do, then could be issues for Florida inside Kyle Field this coming Saturday.
Coach Muschamp mentions that they had a hard time with Bowling Green. That was a good quarterback that they had. He was able to get the ball out quickly, a lot of three-step, a lot of quick throws. Well, if that was a problem last week against Bowling Green, you can bet that's going to be a problem this week against Texas A&M, as Coach Sumlin likes to get the ball out quickly. You'll see a lot of screens. You'll see a lot of quick throws and let your receivers try to make plays after the catch. We'll see if Florida is able to get any pressure on the quarterback at all. The important thing is going to be tackling after the catch, limiting yards after the catch, and we'll see if Florida's secondary is able to tackle and be sound in the defensive side of the ball.
I think it's going to be the most important thing for them is, look, if you can run the ball successfully like they did Saturday, you can carry that over now inside the SEC against an SEC defense. We'll see if Texas A&M brings an SEC defense to the conference. I think that your offense will be fine. You just can't give up big plays in the passing game against an offense that we know lives and thrives off of big plays.
As a team, they were +1 in the turnover margin in Game 1. They'll have to be +1 or more here going on the road in the SEC if you hope to win. Appreciate you joining us. We'll be back next week to recap Texas A&M and take a look forward at the second straight SEC road game as Florida travels to Knoxville to take on the arch-rival Tennessee Vols. Thanks for joining us. You've been watching Out of the Break. Does it seem like there's a home refinance program for everyone but you, the responsible homeowner? Hi, Chris Doering here for Chris Doering Mortgage, and I'm excited to announce the Government Initiative Streamlined Refinance Program. With rates at historic lows, it's never been easier to refinance, saving you tens of thousands over the life of the loan. If you've made your current payment on time for the past 12 months, you may be able to refinance with no appraisal, no income verification, and no closing costs. Not sure if you qualify? Give us a call. Don't miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Chris Doering Mortgage, a name you know, a name you can trust.